Hi, Harry here with the rant on June 13th. A lot of things working at cross purposes here, a lot of things to talk about here. The biggest trend here, which has really defied everything I have, all of my cycles, is this longest and 100% artificial bubble since early 2009, to pull us out of that 2008 greatest financial crisis since the Great Depression. This bubble just won't seem to end. I mean, even COVID hit it hard for a short period of time, but in a one-year rally, got right back to new highs. So clearly saying, hey, no, this bubble's not over. And I do think we're very close to it being over now, but we just have to understand that this has never happened before. Never has any bubble phase of any long-term bull market lasted more than 5 to 6 years, really 5.5, late 24 to late 29. And then you had late 94 into early 2000. That's about the longest that we've had bubble activity sustained. And yet when we went down hard in 2008, just when all of my indicators said for decades this would happen, baby boom, generation would peak in spending, other cycles would come down, and yes, 2008, you would expect a major crash and a long-term demographic downturn like 1930 to 42, like 1969 to 82, from 2008 to 2022, 23 even maybe, okay? Now, what happened here? Well, we know what actually happened, $27 trillion and still climbing with $2 trillion deficits continuing currently. The greatest stimulus program in history basically erased what would have been on the 80-year generation, double generation cycle and the 90-year super bubble cycle. That would have been, late 2022 should have been kind of the low point in stocks for that, and should have seen a second bubble crash after 2000 to 2002, first bubble, the 2008 to 9 generational downturn starting before the heavy stimulus, and now 2020 to 22 should have been the final crash on our 45-year innovation cycle. Okay, I mean, again, generational cycle peaked way back in 2007. It's been the innovation cycle, the technology cycle that's kept it going. And that is the cycle which sees bubbles and can see two bubbles in that 45-year cycle. And so the first tech bubble, early 2000 peak, and now this one, late 24, early 2000, mid 2025 range, depending how you measure different indices, could be the second one, and should be, and it's way overdue. This really should have happened in my natural cycles, which I have refined incredibly since I started in my books and stuff in the early 1980s. That 20 to 22 should have been the finale and the final downturn and crash. And of course, the reason for these crashes and why they're good long term is they restructure all our bad debts and flush out all the zombie companies. This is necessary for free market capitalism to work. You can't have an economy on automaton that just grows 3% a year with 1.5 to 2% inflation and no recessions, and that is the ideal of central banks and governments around the world. Can't happen, shouldn't happen. Unfortunately, it did happen. We have had a 16.3-year bubble now. Bubble the whole time from early, from March 2009 bottom on up till now. And still bubbling, still can't stop it with 525 basis point rate hike, but they did drop the balance sheet, 2.2 trillion. That is tightening against the still 2 trillion deficit, which actually, folks, brings us to roughly neutral. I'd say we're still, with 425 basis points instead of 525, we're still net tight altogether, but barely tight. But this should be enough. With the biggest bubble, most overvalued stock market, real estate market, everything bubble in history, this thing should now be able to find a way to break in and collapse. And that's why we have to remain cautious, even though the market just keeps going up. So again, thwarted the 90-year cycle, okay, its winter, okay, is still here, okay? Its winter only started in late 2021 and does not bottom until about 2032. Now, the demographic winter is over. That was 2008 to 22, 23, okay? But the most powerful and bubbly cycle, the tech cycle, is still in winter, for the next several years. So I think that this bubble still burst, and I think now that we've just gone to neutral, that should be enough for this thing to start to unravel. So I'm just have to keep you updated on this. This just is the worst thing, the biggest and most overwhelming assault on free market capitalism since it started in the late 1700s with Adam Smith. The invisible hand, well, there is no invisible, there's only the visible hand of governments fighting the economy, refusing to let it detox its debts, and zombie companies in a recession, which we've had every decade since World War II, and pretty much that or more in history before that. Recessions are a natural, important part of our economy. I will continue that stand no matter what economists say or hope for. It's not healthy to never have a recession, okay? Definitely not healthy. In fact, I was a turnaround manager. That's what I did in the 80s. I didn't plan on that. I went from strategic planning with Fortune 100 companies at Bain to doing the same thing, a lot of turnarounds. I turned around 6 or 7 small businesses and consulted to many more. And I learned crises are good. I can make more change, or business can make more change, and more rapidly for the better, cutting costs, refocusing on the most profitable markets, knowing your customer better. All this stuff happens more in a crisis, so there's nothing wrong with a crisis. If you don't want bad recessions, don't have bubbly booms. Well, we've already done that. 16.3 year, biggest, longest, unstoppable, most global bubble in history. It has to burst. We have to come down to reality, and I think the next 2 to 3 years is the time for this. So let's stay cautious for now. Now, if the markets can show some sort of resilience that looks durable, but I'm not seeing that. I think the market's just keeping making slight new highs until something goes wrong enough. And now, we have geopolitical problems, and though I am not expecting geopolitical problems to overwhelm our economy. I'm not expecting, that may be the trigger, but what we see here is Russia has, with their aggression in Ukraine, has gotten at a sudden stop. And it's not just Zelensky and Ukraine fighting back harder than expected. The U.S. is behind it. Everybody's behind it. So, and now we have Iran being countered very strongly by Israel, and we know they're the second best military in the world, if you take out Russia, okay? I mean, so I don't expect geopolitical. The geopolitical cycle is one I do not talk about as much as the tech cycle, innovation, and the demographic. That is positive from 2020 through 2036. So I do expect these geopolitical problems to be resolved quickly. They appear to be resolving quickly, and that means the stock market also has to flush out its high valuations and debts, so it can then finish its boom with the millennials that goes up until 2037 before it plateaus, earlier than most generation cycles. So again, we are way off track, folks. We have to get back to reality. That can only happen if the biggest, longest bubble in history bursts, and I do think that is still imminent. If we don't see it start to go down, the first crash should be 40 to 50% in 6 to 8 months, okay? If we don't see that by early 2026, then I'm going to have to relook at everything. But I do still think this bubble is about to burst, and latest late 2025. And I'll just have to keep you up to that. People want to get back in, more aggressive investors and traders. You can do that. You're just going to have a quick trigger if things start to go the other way. Because again, it's like a dam. The longer you hold back a big body of water, or like in this case, a giant bubble, the stronger and harder it's going to burst. That is inviolable law in history thus far. So we have to assume that until proven otherwise. And I will keep you updated.